Hello and welcome to another episode of the RedLaughRiot podcast. My name's Matt.
My name is Benjamin. But don't call me that because my name's Ben. Just call me Ben.
Stop introducing yourself as Benjamin. Say Ben.
Trying to be creative, man. Just let me be.
Yeah, and I'm Michael, joining in on this episode.
Ayo, the unofficial official member of RedLaughRiot.
Yeah, I'm just some guy.
So, what's our main topic?
What are we talking about today? We're talking about the controversial. Well, actually, it's not controversial enough, in my opinion. Thing that is Rotten Tomatoes and in general movie review websites.
Yeah.
How much, in terms of like how much stock you should put in these types of websites. And I feel like right off the bat, it would help if I just explain what actually is Rotten Tomatoes, because this is the point. This is the thing that causes all this debate. And it's the fact that people don't know how Rotten Tomatoes works.
Yes.
And it completely frustrates me because people see a 98 and they think that means it's a 98 out of 100 film. That's not what the score is. That's not what the tomato meter is. It's a percentage. It's 98%. And so when I first learned about Rotten Tomatoes, I was like, what does that mean? What's the percent? And so I think it was my brother who was telling me about it. He was like, oh, it's the percentage of critics that like the movie. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So what it actually is 98% of people gave it a positive review. A positive review can be a 6 out of 10 or more.
Yes.
So that means that something like Black Panther, which is claimed as being one of the highest rated on Rotten Tomatoes or whatever, with the 98% whatever. Yeah. It just means everyone thought it was a 6 or 7 out of 10. Yeah. Because its average rating, if you click, the most important thing you can do on Rotten Tomatoes is click more info and look at the average rating. I guess so. That'd be like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 for Black, or maybe it's like an 8. I don't know. Yeah. But like it's not 98, Yeah. It never equates to that much.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like, especially at this point now, you're starting to see it pop up in like trailers and stuff, and it'll have like, post-release trailers, it'll be like, so you're certified fresh 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah. And then, if you don't know how the system works, you just go, wow, that must be one of the best movies ever made. But the truth is that it was probably just a movie that was fairly impervious to criticism. Yeah. So everyone gave it a positive score in some fashion or another. It's
like Paddington. Everyone talks about how Paddington and Paddington 2 are like
they are pretty awesome.
Highest movies. But it's like, they're like, essentially just like really consistently enjoyable movies.
Yeah, there's nothing you can say is like bad about them, really.
Yeah, but there's also nothing you can say about them that is like, oh, that was excellent. Like, that was the best thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll have a debate about this another time.
Is that the next piss take?
Yeah, that's the next, The
Paddington movies.
I wouldn't be able to take the piss out of those movies.
Oh, true. Yeah, fair.
They're so lovely. Yeah, I think... Well, it brings in an interesting conversation though, because like, we can talk about how maybe the sort of misrepresentation of how the percentage system works. I mean, for starters, it's not really a misrepresentation. I think it's like everyone has accidentally taken this the wrong way. You could argue that for starters, but also
like Rotten Tomatoes doesn't help. They actively like basically they take advantage of the fact that people don't know what the score is. Yeah, like they essentially like bank on that fact, and they hide that other information behind the more info button. It's like they don't want people to know that their system is not flawed, but like not being seen.
It's far too simple.
It's not being seen in the way that it should be seen.
But at the same time, like, I think that lends itself, like, I think we can all agree that it's kind of silly to judge the quality of a movie based on the percentage of positive reviews necessarily over negative reviews, right?
Well, I actually find the score, personally, I find the score quite useful. What it's not useful for is for like ranking and saying this movie is better than that because this was a 90 and that was an 85. Yeah. That's not a good way of ranking. The way I see it is like, it's a very rough general estimate whether or not it's worth seeing this movie. It's like it's a confidence scale. Like, how confident can I be that this movie's going to be good or not good?
Yeah.
And when you get around the 50s, 60s, like that's when you know, like, there's mixed opinions. So it could either be good or it could be bad. That's when you're unsure. When it's like low, like 30s, something like that, you're like, oh, it's probably not good because most people agree that it's not good, you know?
But for me, that's very worrying because, first of all, it creates a really simplistic way of looking at movies where people want to go into a movie and you know, for me, like, my stereotypical perception of somebody who is going into a movie and bases their decision, you know, on a Rotten Tomatoes score is that they're basically only going to movies for simple enjoyment and nothing else, you know? They're not looking to see what's amazing and what's crazy and what's challenging. They're just looking for something, whether, you know, oh, is it good or is it bad? Is it worth my time and money or is it not?
Well, that's exactly what it is.
For me, that's such a silly way of looking at things. But then you start getting into the idea of like, okay, well then you just say, check out the average score. But is that even a good idea? Are aggregates of scoring even a good idea? You know, people might say use Metacritic, and it's like, do I really want to use Metacritic and just look at an aggregate? You know, is that the best way to judge a film if you are the type of person to read reviews?
No.
Or not read reviews? You know, or just to check on movies before you go see them. Is an aggregate really a good idea in any fashion?
It's completely fair. What I will say about the Rotten Tomatoes thing is you're saying like it's an incredibly simple system. I think the fact is that this day and age, the way consumers treat movies, that's a necessity. It's a necessity for there to be a simple yes or no. Yeah. Will I watch this? Is it fresh? Is it rotten? That kind of like a simple way of deciding, because there's so many movies out there, people need to know. So I think for the majority of consumers, like, it's fine to treat it that. I treat it that way sometimes because I'm like, I just want to know like quickly, is this something I should worth investing time in, or money in, you know, and like if it's rotten, it's like, oh well, I won't bother, you know, whatever. And if it's fresh, then I might look into it more and then decide. Or these days, I'm pretty open to seeing almost any movie. So if it's anything fresh on any scale, I'll probably go still see it if it had intrigued me in another way, by like who's making it and all that kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. It's like there's more to it than an aggregate. There's like reading actual reviews, and the most important thing you do is align yourself with reviewers who fit what kind of stuff you like.
A reviewer you trust and a reviewer that you...
Because everyone's different.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a different opinion.
It goes back to, you know, the whole thing of, you know, me saying, you know, obviously films being an art form, it's subjective, and, you know, people like different things. So therefore, you know, you may see a score that says 98 or whatever, and you may still, you know, you may be the 2% of the people who don't like it. And then there's also the interesting thing of the difference between the critic score and the audience score. So that, you know, has impacts to play as well. That, you know, the you know, your average film goer is probably not necessarily going to agree with the critics. While you're more like pretentious person like Michael is probably going to agree with the critics.
Well, I mean, maybe sometimes. I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Like, I think to me the most important thing for someone who cares about what they're watching and wants to get something more out of a film than necessarily straight up entertainment or straight up just a nice night out or something, which is fair, that's fine, but if you're wanting to get more out of it than that, I highly recommend, like, if you're the type of person who's going to look up stuff about a movie, read a review or something, you know, or like even after you've seen it, read some reviews, because I think really we shouldn't be using other sources to help us decide whether something is good or bad. We should be using our own intuition. We should be deciding, hey, do I want to see that? Who's the director? What have they done before? What actors are in it that I might like, etc. And then before or after the movie, you can try and gain some understanding for either why you want to see it or why you thought it was good. And that's going to make you engage with it more, and you're going to enjoy the movie more generally, rather than just looking at something on like a good versus bad scale.
You
know? Yeah, and that's exactly, these days it's kind of what I usually do is I try to like look at who made it, look at like the actors, like is this something I'm going to be interested in seeing from these people or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's usually how I decide these days what movies to go see.
Yeah.
I think also a thing of even, you know, essentially, you know, the only person who can work out if you like a film or not is you.
Yes.
Rather than, you know, a critic or even a friend or something like that. So like, so it's like if you want to go see a film, go see it. That's like the best indication of making that decision.
And in most cases I don't even want to look at the score because I don't want to have a preconceived idea of whether or not it's going to be good or bad, and then that way your decision and your own rating is completely genuine and pure.
Well, because there's so many, you know, I think that's a thing that sort of, and I'm pretty sure I've talked about it before, is the you know, the difference between expectation and reality when it comes to going into watching a movie, right? So if you think that a movie is going to be really good, and then it's bad, right? Then
even if it's not bad, even if it's just like not as good as you're expecting, but still good,
then
you can still be quite disappointed.
Then that's you know what I mean? And that has a bigger impact than if that margin of error is smaller. I think that impacts the perception of the movie, whether how bad it is based off of your like going into the movie.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I remember having that problem before. Like, I think with La La Land. I got so hype about that movie that I read every review, you know? Like, I knew so much about the movie. I knew why everyone thought it was an absolute masterpiece, all of this stuff. And I think it is now. I love that movie now. But the first time I saw it, I was almost shockingly disappointed by a movie that I still thought was fantastic, you know? And it's like sometimes... I guess, like, I do think it's important to engage, and I think it's important to read reviews. And if you're the type of person to read reviews before you see a movie, that's fine. But also measure yourself, you know? And to take that sort of back down to like this way of people looking at movies simplistically with something like Rotten Tomatoes, I think it's the same kind of thing. You know, if you're the type of person who's prone to look at a simple good versus bad and base your entire opinion of a movie before you've even seen it on that score, then that's going to be a problem.
I think it's the whole thing of, you know, taking... You know, whether it's a, you know, Rotten Tomatoes score or even an actual written review is to take it with a grain of salt, you know? And to, you know, to try and go in with basically something that I've tried to do more and more is trying going into movies blind. Because I think that's...
So you want to be able to see the movie though?
Hilarious, but it's to go into a film with as little preconceived notions as possible. Because that's the best experience for me. Now that may not necessarily be the best experience for someone else.
Honestly, I think it's always the best experience for everyone ever. But it's just that most people can't like commit to doing that.
I can't do it. I definitely can't.
I was really proud of basically not seeing any promotional material for Endgame before I saw it, and that was so enjoyable. That would have been difficult. It wasn't even that difficult. Like, just avoided discussion and mention of trailers on when I saw them online. I was like, all right, gone. I might have deleted Reddit in like the weeks leading up or something. I can't remember.
Just pure self-control.
I can't remember. Maybe I didn't. Anyway. And I just never saw the trailer. And then I think the first time I saw any footage or any trailer for it was when I saw Captain Marvel, the very first trailer for Endgame played. And that was my first introduction to any of it. And that was basically a very short teaser that didn't even show much. It had like a bit of the first scene, basically. And that was a really good like tease to get me hyped for what I was going to see like the next month or whenever it was. And like, so it's possible. It's definitely possible. But like most people can't contain themselves. Or don't feel like confident enough. Like what I was saying about like sometimes looking at the confidence scale of Rotten Tomatoes, like they want to be more confident that it's gonna be worth their time. You know, they want to.
Well, it goes back to you know the motivations of the person going into it, right? Is that you've got X amount of films coming out this year. What's going to be worth my time and money? Because I only have finite amount of resources for essentially, you know, and well, not infinite, but
yeah,
there's a disparity between the amount of films that come up and the amount of time that people have. And it goes back to a conversation that I had with my mate, is that, even if you could stop time now, right, and make no music, no movies, whatever come out, right, you would never be able to catch up and see everything.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? It's just impossible.
Yeah.
Which is a sad reality.
Yeah.
There's so many things on my watch list. I'm like, maybe I'll actually never watch this.
Yeah, I feel that way about so many movies.
Yeah. It's absolutely a sad. It's a sad reality of life. But so it's basically like using some sort of thing to run a movie through to basically be like, okay, is this worth my time?
The great filter.
Yeah, filter. That's
pretty much.
Yeah.
Is this, I have 2 hours to watch a movie. What should I watch? I'll watch this because it's got a good rating,
Yeah. I just think it would be good for people to make more informed decisions, because it means they're probably going to be able to engage more with what they're doing. And I think that's going to depend on the person. Sometimes it's just as simple as knowing who a director is and being able to pick something based on a director, things like that. For me, it's like I'm pretty much like very prone to like reading a lot of reviews and things, because at that point I can understand, okay, I kind of know the movies that I like, like I almost never go into a movie and am shocked or surprised by how much I loved or hated it.
Right.
So for me, it's like if I read 1 review or 2 reviews, I can pretty much gauge, even if they like the movie, I can read a bit and I can be like, oh, nah, I'm not going to like that.
Yeah.
Or, oh, yeah, I'll probably love that. And then I can stop reading and watch the movie.
Do you purposely watch movies that you're not going to like?
Almost never, no. I try to make sure that unless it's like a big movie that I know like a lot of people will be talking about and it'd be good to talk about it.
Yeah. Infinity War.
Yeah, for example. But most of the time, like, we've only got a limited time in the world. I'm going to seek out movies that I want to see. Yeah. And I think that I'm going to enjoy, because I think that's a much better use of my time. Yeah. Like that's why if you look at like any of my like lists or whatever on Letterboxd, it's like half the movies that I've even watched that year are on my best of list. There's not much stuff that I watch a lot that I don't particularly like. Yeah.
Interesting. Because I'll sometimes watch a movie on purpose. That's a bad movie. Well, I usually go into it watching it because I'm like, I want to see how bad it is, essentially. Right. It's a curiosity thing.
I think maybe I used to have that curiosity, but not anymore.
Yeah.
Do you guys think movie reviews in general are a good thing? Like, what are your guys' opinion on actual just movie reviews?
Like whether or not they should exist?
Well, no, I think they should exist, but I mean like in terms of the entire like culture as a whole, do you think they're a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, I think they're a good thing.
Okay.
Like I find it personally, even just for me, writing just short little paragraphs on Letterboxd really helps just me understand what I liked about a movie. Yeah. And it just lets you get that out in a written form, which I think is a good medium to get those thoughts out.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Like you don't need to make like a 10-minute YouTube video about discussing what you liked about this movie, where most of these YouTube channels are just describing the plot of the movie. And then this thing happened and that thing happened and it was so cool. And like if you write a review and like try to make yourself concise and like put yourself into words like why I liked the movie, I find that really helpful. And
it almost makes you like the movie more.
Yeah, exactly. And I would hope that someone reading my reviews could gain something from that and could be able to make a decision for them on whether or not it sounds like something they would or would not enjoy.
Well, I think there's something more personalized about reading a written review versus seeing a score. You know what I mean? So like, seeing a score is just like, also I think as well as seeing a score can be misleading because it's like,
different people have different scales.
Different people have you never know how someone's scale works. And then also it can be misleading as well because you can get 2 very different films with a 9 out of 10. Also, or pick a number, you know, right. And they have the same score, but one's like,
one's a lot more negative than the other.
Yeah, you know, shit like that. Which is interesting as well.
I've been like flirting with the concept of not rating movies altogether recently.
Yeah.
Well, like, and by recently I mean over the last like probably 5 years. I've thought to myself quite a few times, maybe I should just stop doing that, you know? Maybe I should just try and put into words what I think. The reason I don't do that is because it helps me if I'm making an end of the year list and ranking, that I can remind myself of my general thoughts, you know? So like a rating is a good thing to just, if I'm like sorting, I'm like, okay, here's the 5s, here's the 4.5s, here's the, you know, kind of thing. And sometimes that'll still change and shift around, but you know, it provides a good ordering of things easily, which is why I still do it. But yeah, I don't know. I
think it's still an important piece of the like process.
Yeah,
like you say, for sorting, and it's like just like it's good just naturally just try and like put it on a scale like, oh, it's in this range. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But like I want to say that there's a difference between you making the score for yourself and like looking at someone else's score, or looking at an aggregate score. I think it's like how I find it helpful for me to to categorize things into a star rating, because then I kind of can check myself if am I being consistent with both what I'm saying in the review and also like with other films that I watch, like am I giving things the right amount of whatever the word is, you know, praise or sort of that negativity based on that. And it's a good way to kind of scale it. It's a good way to rank things. I do like ranking things. I just naturally just enjoy ranking, and so that's a good helpful part of that scale. But yeah, like I say, like if you look at someone else's scores, it's basically like you got to view it as like a percentage for that person, but not necessarily that, oh, that's a 5-star movie or whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's not the same as my 5 stars, you know? Like comparing other people's same ratings doesn't really work that way. You know, it's good for comparing one person's ratings against their own rankings of other films. I think that's what it's most useful for.
It's more of a inwards thing than an outwards.
Like because you might see someone who rated a film a 3.5 stars. Maybe Michael rates The Dark Knight a 3.5 stars or something, and like that's a good way of gauging like how he feels about that type of movie, whereas his 5 stars is like this other type of movie, like Good Time or whatever, you know, something that's just in a different zone. And so you can get an idea of his general taste more. Like his taste points in that direction rather than this direction.
I do find it difficult though sometimes. I think mostly because like some movies are just so different from each other. And sometimes it's so hard. Like sometimes you'll see a movie and you won't even know where to put it, you know? Like because of different reasons. Maybe it's a different kind of film than you're used to seeing. I remember seeing a movie a little while ago called, I forgot what it was called. It was like called The Image Book. It was this movie by Jean-Luc Godard, and it was like a 1-hour visual poem that consisted of voiceover narration and then imagery, but it wasn't anything like a movie that I've ever seen before. Like you could very much argue that it was more of like a statement, like some sort of like philosophical thing or something, you know? It was a lot more like weird. It just didn't have a plot, you know? It didn't have characters. It was just imagery. And it was so hard for me to like put that on a scale. Even if something like enjoyment, it was so hard for me to put on a scale. In terms of quality, it was almost impossible to put on a scale because it was so different than anything else. You can't measure it up. And I think that even extends to like sort of like the difference between something like a superhero film or a blockbuster movie and like something that's maybe trying a bit like to be something different. And then the fact that we're kind of using this one scale to like measure this thing against every other thing that we've ever seen is like strange, but I still do it.
I think it's strange, but like it's like it's still it's an important metric, and I think it's like it's good that you have that challenge to like see where can I put this, because often it's like when I'm watching a movie, like it's almost like you have to tick a certain amount of boxes to get to a 4-star. You know, like you have to be like an adept filmmaker to make a 4-star movie at the very least, that kind of thing. And then like you say, it's like you see a movie that's just not conventional like that, like what you're describing sounds a lot like Last and First Men.
I was wondering if you were going to talk about that one, the Johansson
thing. Which was, I think I talked about that previously on the podcast. It's sort of the festival last year, right? And it's like it's very similar. It's like it doesn't have necessarily a plot, it's basically like voice over the whole thing, and all this imagery and stuff like that. It's like like when I watched that movie, I didn't obviously think about like how good is the plot, or in general I don't usually think about how good is the plot. I'm usually thinking about like the characters and the story, and but like that obviously doesn't has that. It's like, what does it, how do you rate it? And like, I don't know, me, it's just like I essentially whatever my first instinct is kind of what I put. It's like your natural feeling of like what was this movie? And I think I'd probably give it 4 or 4.5. Like it's just like it's a well-made film, and it like tells you something interesting. Like, I don't know, it's just like it's not like it's not saying that just because it's a 4-star movie that it's equally as good as another 4-star movie, or that it's on the same level. It's like, it's more like there's this tree that goes outwards, and there's all these different levels that still equal 4 stars, but they're a different type of good. Some of them are like really enjoyable, like just having a really good time, and then others are like really just well-made, crafted pieces, but they might not be quite as enjoyable. You know, it's like this different levels.
I think it also goes to how successful was the film at trying to do what it did. You know what I mean? So like, so like, you know, a comedy, for example, right, is going to have or a blockbuster or whatever, it's going to have very different goals to, you know, an experimental indie film. You know, so it's like, so yes, two of those films can both get like, you know, 4 stars or 8 out of 10s or whatever metric you want to use, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're both in the same category of film, but that they were that successful in trying to do what
you're trying to judge it like on its own merits rather than versus the merits of other things.
I like to think of sometimes like a lot of the time my 5-star movies is like, this movie is as good as it could be at what it is. You know, like you could say that there are better movies than this, but this movie couldn't be a better version of this movie. I think I said that about Infinity War. Like that's pretty much like what a 5-star is for me.
But then it comes to things like, I guess like with your review of like Waves, you know, you still gave it a 5 despite what you felt was like a very obvious flaw, right? But I do worry that maybe with some people that I've sort of read or watched on YouTube, etc., they're kind of the rating scale is almost just like a way up of like flaws versus good things, you know? And even if there are certain things that are overwhelmingly good, because the movie has certain flaws, they don't want to push it to that top. Kind of, because, you know, like 10 out of 10, right? Or 5 out of 5. That's like almost an emotional kind of score at that point. Like it's something that you're giving us something that isn't just perfect, but you love it, right? Or at least that would be the hope, you know? But I do wonder maybe if, because we're kind of assigning these ratings, and because we're probably thinking about them either on a conscious or subconscious level while we're watching a movie, how much that takes away from the engagement, you know? Because then you're just starting to think of a movie as a way up between good and bad, you know? If we didn't have a rating system at all, if there just wasn't one that any of us used, how much more would we engage with like other parts of the film? How much more could we talk about movies if we weren't just talking about the good bits versus the bad bits, you know? And we start going like, you know, you're not even thinking about that stuff anymore. You're thinking about like maybe what the film is putting across, how it's putting it across. You know, you're looking at it more like when you walk into an art gallery and you see something on the wall and you're like, that's crazy, you know, but you think about it more. You know, you're not just like, oh, I like that, and then you keep walking. You know, you've got to engage with it in order to like access it properly. And I feel like maybe what we're doing now with movies in a good versus bad sense might, while I do it too, maybe it's not the best way to engage.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I know it. Yeah. I think maybe that's why, you know, in terms of a which way is better question.
Yeah.
You know, you sort of get the, is it good or is it bad with a number rating or whatever.
Yeah.
While with a actual write up or like, you know, 2 sentences or whatever, you can sort of get your like point across, I think, in a much more succinct way. Yeah, I don't know. Like,
Roger Ebert once wrote an interesting article about like rating systems, and I think he remembered saying, like, he said something like he's only found one rating system that he thinks is like a good one or something like that. And I think it was something like, I don't quite remember, but it was basically like this one critic used a scale, and like he would give each, like, there were like 4 different illustrations of like the way he was sitting in the theater or something, and there would be one that would be like him like leaning forward, you know, and intently looking, and then be one him kind of sitting in the chair like normally, and then there would be one where he was like more distracted or something, and then there would be one where like the seat was empty, you know, which is basically like, I don't ever want to see this movie, I should have walked out, etc. And I think that maybe is a good way, because it's more like, rather than talking about a positive versus negative, it's talking about your overall engagement with the content, you know, and your engagement with the piece in a way that is meaningful, rather than just it was well crafted, you know. You're looking at it in a deeper level than that. So well,
that's why I think it's good, like not to think of your scale as just a number, but like an emotional response to that movie, you know, rather
than like a way up, you know, of good things versus bad things.
But I think it's like, it has to be a marriage of both of those things, and I've said this before on the podcast, is like a review for me is a marriage of how good the movie was and how much I enjoyed the movie, I guess, and it's that response that naturally comes in finding it on that scale. And I mean, the way you describe those different seating positions, like, is kind of similar to how I look at some of my scores. Like the intent looking at it, that would be like 4.5 or 5. The left the theater, that's a 0.5 star. Just sitting there and enjoying it, that's probably a 3 or a 3.5. You know, or getting distracted and bored, that's in the 1.5 to 2 range. You know, so those are like, even though those are just photos instead of numbers. They still represent a similar thing to what I represent in my scores, or at least what I know in my head that they represent.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because, you know, for me, it's what like word or whatever comes to mind after the film's ended, right? So like you know, a 0.5 star is like, that was shit, you know, versus like, you know, a 2.5 was like, you know, it's like just a meh. And then like, you know, a 9 out of 10 is like, you know, usually a film that I'm like sitting there after the credits have rolled and I'm still thinking about it.
But what do you do then when you get to the point where like there's another option, which would be like the person sitting in the chair with like a thoughtful look on their face? You know, like where do you go then, where you walk out of a movie and you just go, that was interesting, but maybe you don't know necessarily.
Well, that's what you write the review for.
Right? But that's what you write. But that's what I mean. Like
thoughts into words.
But I mean, like, I just mean like, it's hard to find space for those kind of films on a numerical scale.
Well, you can't. Exactly. It's like what I was saying before about like, not every 4-star movie is the same type of 4-star movie.
But even then, I don't know if I could assign it 4 stars. You know, I don't know like if I'd be able to assign movies like that, because I know that subconsciously in my head I'm still going to be comparing it to other things, and at that point also the enjoyment scale kind of gets thrown out the window, because at that point you've just seen a film or something that doesn't even really particularly take enjoyment as like the first factor that it wants you to notice. You know, like, I mean, like if we get into like, you know, like these, you know, like Russian art films and stuff, you watch those, you don't sit there and just be like, you know, oh man, I had fun, you know, but you sit there and you're thinking about a lot, and you've got images that you remember and they run through your head and things like that. And there's so many, the way that you engage is so completely different than it is with like most movies, that it's, for me, it's almost hard to rate them in the same way. Like, you can go, oh, it achieved what it set out to do. Yes, but you're still, it's still different from all this other stuff.
Yeah,
you know,
I think it's that thing of that no matter what system that you can come up with, there will always be limitations.
Yeah,
you know, and that, you know, in the stuff that you've been bringing up, like there's just certain things that you just can't.
Yeah,
that, you know, a number rating or a letter rating or whatever.
Yeah,
doesn't do it justice. And even in a way, a write-up doesn't necessarily do it justice either. And that's unfortunately the limitations of movie reviewing and rating.
I guess all I'm trying to say is that, and like, I guess when you said like a letter grade, it made me think of this. Is like, whenever you're grading something, there's an implication that there's a curriculum to be followed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That there's like a set of rules that something follows in order for you to give it such.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a personal enjoyment scale, you know? And then like, and we can talk about, oh, it's a way up, or like it's a marriage of my personal enjoyment and how good the movie was, right? But then you have to start going, what defines good? And therefore, am I taking an objective stance, you know? And is that okay? Should I be doing that? You know?
Well, that's why I think it's like, when I say it's the marriage, it's like it's the marriage of the objective and the subjective.
Yeah, but how is it a marriage of the objective when you can't be objective?
What's subjective about movies at all?
Like, there are definitely certain aspects of filmmaking where you can say that was well shot and that wasn't well shot. Like, there are definitive things you can say objectively.
You can do that to an extent. Yeah. And I think it's important to debate them, but I think it's very hard. Like for me, it's like, I watched a really good video by this video game critic, and it was called Subjectivity is Implied. And it was basically like that we should just throw away the word objective when it comes to things, right? And instead of going, oh, well, because every opinion is technically subjective, then it doesn't matter. We shouldn't be saying that. We should be saying, because every opinion is subjective, that means that people have the power to change their opinions and change the opinions of other people, which means that debate becomes more important in that aspect. Like, maybe we should throw away the idea of like being objective about anything, because well shot, I mean, like, how does that even define well shot? Unless, like, you know, like, how do you say a movie wasn't well shot?
Like the movie I saw the other day that looked like it was shot on an iPhone, like the camera moves were stupid and unmotivated, and it was real grainy. Like it was just bad. Like it just
okay. Well, what if I
appear like a professional? You know.
Okay. Well, what if I came to you then and said, you know what, I actually really like the way that film was shot. I thought that the sort of the grainy presentation, etc., made it sort of give it a home movie feel. It added to the realism, and it added to the sort of theater-like feel, because it brought me into it in a more kind of right there in their face way. Like, then what do you do?
I would say, like, the way I would view whether or not a film is good is whether or not it is trying to be a good movie. And I guess, again, you're going to argue it's just a subjective opinion, but the opinion of me is that, yeah, the movie was trying to be taken seriously, and so it should have been up to a certain standard, and it wasn't up to that standard.
Okay, well then, but like, do you think that intent is important in that aspect?
Yeah.
Why is intent more important than the person who receives the art?
I'm not saying that your opinion is invalid.
No, I know.
I'm like, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. In fact, even in that movie, I thought there are aspects of that where I can understand why someone might want it to feel slightly more homemade.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it achieved the goal that it was trying to achieve, essentially.
Yeah. We have to, like, a lot of people say, you know, that like director intent is very important, right? Or like the way that the director is presenting, like what they're presenting is, you know, it has to, like, if it doesn't match up with the intent, then that you can call that like a literal flaw, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can. Because what if the audience receives it a different way that they like?
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
Also, it goes to, how do we even know what the director's intent was?
Yeah, well, I mean, like sometimes it's
just presuming that.
I mean, sometimes the director will actually say what their intent is, you know, but like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes like it's hard to find examples, but I think sometimes certain films like with the help of things like time away, you know, like, and like the film sort of existing for a long time kind of come forward in more interesting ways. Like I think that happens with a lot of B movies. Things like that. A lot of movies from like the 1950s, 1960s and stuff, where like generally at the time they were considered terrible pictures, pieces of crap, right? And now they're getting a revival as these like unique, interesting, sometimes very almost accidentally artful kind of masterpieces, you know? And like then what do? Then how do you judge it? Because like we're approaching things from an entirely different context. And because everyone has their own context that they're putting onto a film, you know, it becomes so like wild and so many like different layers to what's going on. Yeah, it's very different, like, you know? So then like why does intent necessarily matter? I don't know if it does.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is not necessarily an answer to that question.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's like what we were saying before about it's like it's less useful to compare other people's opinions and more useful to compare their own opinion to themselves. And like if like for example, if there were like a slew of movies like that somebody really enjoys and they rate them all 5 stars because they love those wacky B movies, it's like, well, now I know what this person enjoys, and it's not to say that they're wrong, but that they are looking for a different thing and they're looking for a different intent. So when I see The Turn of the Screw, and I'm like, I want to the way this movie presents itself looks like it's trying to be serious, and that's the experience I want to have, and we don't get that. That's when I don't like it. But if you watched it and you're like, I want to watch a homemade movie, you know, and you felt like this feels like they're giving us a homemade movie, and then you might enjoy it because you're right, your experience is different. And I guess there's nothing wrong with that.
I think it's interesting though what you mentioned you know, about objectivity versus subjectivity, and that there's because I was thinking about that the other day, you know, like objective truth versus subjective truth. And that what, you know, like what can you put into each category? And really the only things that I thought that you can necessarily put into objective truth would be like science, and that's about it. So when it comes to film, it's like you really can't. You can't say, well, I've got objective reasons why this movie is bad. I don't think you can do that. I think you have to at least understand that like everything that comes out of your mouth when you're talking about a movie is an opinion, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't debate films, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't like talk about them, you know, because a lot of people like will come to like get really defensive, you know, like if you say, oh, I hated this movie, they'll just say, well, you know, opinions are subjective anyway, so it doesn't matter. And it's like, well, I mean, of course they're subjective, you idiot. It's my personal experience of something, you know, like why don't we, you know, instead of doing that, let's talk about it. Maybe you'll change my mind, maybe I'll change yours, you know.
Most people these are so set concretely in their opinion that they would just never admit to changing their mind or anything, even if you did change their mind. So I think it's impossible to be objective. And I don't think we should try to be. So then if you say it's impossible for us to be objective and it's possible for us to, you know, then I guess the question is like, what is the point in going online, reading other people's reviews, or seeing other scores and stuff like that, if you think like there's no scale, there's no standard that you can judge movies by, therefore what can I look at online to determine whether or not I'm
because you know what you're going to like. You know what you're going to like. Like I feel like at least if you see like positives and negatives, you can use that as a jumping off point. Like, okay, well, most people like it, so you know I'm probably going to like it, you know. But like for me, I don't read reviews to find out if something's good or bad. You know, you read reviews to engage with it. And, you know, like just like, you know, it's all subjective, but like, let's say you read 100 reviews and they all talk about, oh, like this movie has like, to me, like feelings of this or like themes of this. Then, I mean, it's probably coming across very well, you know? Like, so I read reviews to try and engage with it more. Like maybe it's not my engagement of the movie. But let's say I've just gone out and seen La La Land, and then I go and look at a review afterwards, and somebody talks about how much they appreciate maybe the fact, like one person's going, the fact that Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone can't dance properly and professionally in this movie is dumb, and I don't like it because I feel like it should be that way.
Yeah.
And then another review goes, Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone's dancing is endearing because it makes them seem more human, that they're not like professional dancers. Then you can sort of start to weigh it up in your own head, you know, look at those opinions and sort of figure out where that sits for you and how you feel.
Yeah.
And that's going to change your view of the movie in some way, you know. Like, it just means that we can all listen to each other.
Well, I think, again, it goes back to what I was saying about, you know, looking at, like, my mate's Letterboxd reviews. And, like, I caught up with them the other day and I was like, you know, about how fascinating it was that, you know, that, you know, I'll look at his reviews and we'll drastically disagree on certain films.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily, and that's not a bad thing. That's the beauty, and that's why films are so fascinating, is that, you know, you can read someone else's opinion and you can be like, I completely disagree with everything you're saying. That very fact is what makes film and filmmaking so interesting.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, when it comes to like going online to find out what you want to watch, like, you can look at a Rotten Tomatoes score and like just see the general consensus, but I think the most important thing, if you really like don't know if you want to go see this movie, is if you find a movie reviewer that aligns with the things that you like and that you trust. Not necessarily just following everything that they say, but like at least listening to them and helping yourself understand. Well, you know, you might or might not like this movie because they did or did not like these certain aspects of the movie.
And even just, you know, hearing, you know, so, you know, or like a friend's recommendation or something, you know, like you should go and see X film.
Although sometimes it's like, sometimes I'm always like hesitant to recommend movies that I love, because it's like puts that amount of social pressure on oh, now my friend is going to be thinking about the fact that I love this movie the whole time. And
it's a toughie. Yeah. No, I agree.
Well, I think that's very interesting. Another thing that I think is interesting is some things that I've been watching and listening to in the past few weeks. In this segment, which is...
Oh, yeah.
You didn't leave the gate. Sorry. In this segment, which is...
What you doing?
And this is a segment in which we talk about what we have been doing. What I've been doing a lot recently is listening to new music, which I've been kind of...
The new music.
Well, maybe for the last 3-4 months or something. I'm basically like listening to this playlist that I made of like a bunch of like, if you like this artist, you'll like this artist, you know. And so I went through that chain for a lot of the music that I already liked, found other artists that were similar or something like that, or found a bunch of playlists, so added albums or playlists to this giant playlist of like 2,500 songs or something. I almost said thongs there.
I noticed Ben. I heard you.
Anyway, and then listening to all those and then picking out a few ones, putting into a smaller playlist of the ones that I really love, finding these new artists that I've tend to pick out these songs from, stuff that I really enjoy, and that's just been really fun. Just like I'm enjoying music a lot more than I ever have, because I'm like so open to just hearing everything. Everything else, you know. So it's been really fun. And then, I mean, this is the main thing of note that I watched recently. I rewatched Reservoir Dogs in theaters, in a theater. And
that's cool.
The experience of watching that at a theater was just like, I enjoyed it even more than I'd watched it before. And I love it as much, or if not more, than I did the first few times I watched it.
Good.
And I just everything about that movie, the direction and the editing in that movie, I think are really, really effective. And it makes me happy to know that, because probably it was like 3 or 4 years ago that I last watched it, maybe, before I like went to film school or anything. And now I've had a whole process like of learning a lot more about film and about editing as well. And now watching it again, now that I've got a bit of a new lens or different lens, like still knowing that what I found effective then is still equally as effective now. Like knowing, I guess it's kind of like confirming for myself that I wasn't just and like enjoying something that actually wasn't that good or something, you know. And so that's really cool.
Do you want to go? Should I go?
Michael, you go.
Okay.
I'll sandwich.
Okay. What is it? I'll be the meat.
I'll be the other bread.
The other bread. Okay.
The other bread.
Well, okay. I don't know if I can really talk about any movies that I've been watching, simply because I haven't really been watching that many. I don't think. I mean, we've kind of. I've hardly been watching any films. I did watch The Place Beyond the Pines.
Oh yes.
When I was. Yeah, I watched it with my parents. That was a fantastic experience. I thought it was very just poetic in the way that it sort of the structural changes it makes, and the way that like different things about the movie make you constantly reassess past events and think about their impact. And I think a lot of that movie reminded me of Waves, where a lot of the film is thinking about ramifications of things that have happened, whether it's before, during, or after the film has ended. You know what I mean? Like, and I think it's really cool. It's really cool. And I thought all the portrayals were really excellent. And I think it's just a movie that encourages you to try and keep up with it as well. You know, it's consistently a challenging view. Yeah, I think would be a good way to put it. Yeah.
And by the way, for anyone who hasn't watched those two movies, go watch them. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Especially Waves.
Yeah. Go watch both of those movies. They're fantastic. Aside from that, I've been playing video games mostly, so I guess I should talk about that a little bit. I got into two video games in specific, which were, first was called Hollow Knight, which was a really fantastic sort of platforming game. Very hard, but it was very fun. And it's just the kind of game that keeps getting bigger the more you play. Right. The more time you spend, the more you realize that like one little door that you never opened at some random place on the map is actually a whole new area, you know. It's that kind of feeling. It's like a feeling of constant discovery and like exploration, which then leads me on to the other game I played for the first time, which was Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is probably one of the biggest games ever. A lot of people talk about that game on the Nintendo Switch. And it for me, the biggest thing I got out of that was the ability to literally do whatever you want. Yeah. You felt like you could do anything you want in that game. Just a massive open world. You can look at any problem and solve it in 100 different ways. There is no right answer. There is no scripted game event that you have to do in order to make things work. You can do anything any way you want. And that level of freedom is almost impossible to find in games. And I think it like generally those two things, or those two games made me reassess what games could be and sort of look at them as an art form in their own, you know, and it just got me back into the whole idea of games.
That's one of the reasons I love Shadow of Mordor so much. Right. Like the free roaming, just do whatever the hell you want, basically. I think you gotta play that, Michael.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true. Like when I was watching you play that game, you know, it's like you sort of, you see every battle and you're like, how do I approach, you know? Yeah. Which is kind of exactly the same as Breath of the Wild. Right. You see something, you're like, how can I approach? And you can do whatever you want. Like there's even memes about like the ridiculous ways that people have like approached a battle, you know? Like maybe you just go and you hit the people at the watchtowers first so they can't, you know, tell everyone else that you're there because they can't blow the horn or whatever. Or maybe you're going to do something crazy. Like you're going to like take an explosive barrel that you found a mile away up a gigantic hill, and then you're going to throw it so it drops on all of them and kills them or something, you know, like there's just, you can do whatever you want at any time. And it's a beautiful game.
Interesting.
Absolutely beautiful game. That's me though. How about you, Matt?
Some movies. We got Tootsie, Bridesmaids, The Tree of Life, Flowers of Shanghai, The Fall, and Soul.
Okay, let's hear about Flowers of Shanghai first.
Flowers of Shanghai.
What's that?
I don't remember.
It's about like it was a pretty interesting film because it was about like four stories going on at once, and it sort of cut between each one, and it was four girls who were in brothels in China. China, I think.
How Shen. Crazy. And
they were in like sort of like a slavery situation because they like were like owned by someone and sort of had to pay their way back in order to buy their own freedom, which is interesting. I don't know, man. But I did like it. It was like, just a beautiful. Obviously, like the plot's kind of fucked up, but like, just a beautifully shot film that that was quite like meditative, and I just popped it on and just watched it and just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a director who's literally famous for his movies being slow. Yeah. Like, it's almost part of his aesthetic is that his movies are generally very slow. Yeah. So that's why I was interested. Yeah. And then we got...
Tree of Life?
Tree of Life, Life.
Did not like that movie.
Interesting. Cool. Don't spoil because I'm going to watch it with Ben.
It was on my list for ages because I was slowly working my way through Cinefix's top 50, which I still haven't done, but I'm a lot more close. I'm up to like 46 or something now. But it was just it was just boring to me. And it was interesting because my review I just wrote, I really wanted to enjoy this film, but I just didn't.
That's how I felt about the first Wonder Woman.
So I don't really have many like deep thoughts on it other than just like I was bored during it. Which sometimes, I don't know, it's interesting because not to go back to the main topic again, but to go back to the main topic again, is that I think it's interesting because when talking about movies, especially listening to you talk about movies, I feel like you're much more justified in sort of your opinions in that. Well, usually I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like, I just didn't enjoy it, or like,
I think that's fair. Like if you're just bored, that's a fair enough assessment.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you think I'm justified in leaving Tokyo Story now?
No, because the last 20 minutes of that movie literally make it what it is.
How was I supposed to know that?
You didn't.
It doesn't.
I think maybe one day
it doesn't hold my attention for that whole time.
It doesn't matter. I don't give a fuck that you haven't seen it. Okay, but what I will say to you is, I think one day just go on YouTube and just look up Tokyo Story final scene, and you will at least understand where it ended up.
Okay,
and then you will get it. That's all you need to do.
I will say about Tree of Life though, I did still watch the entire thing despite. Being bored.
No, cool.
Because it's very rare for me to stop a movie. In fact, the only movie that I did that with was Death of a Salesman. I don't know, something that I've sort of started doing is I made 2 goals at the start of the year, kind of. One has been drastically more successful than the other. Cool. So it was to try and watch a movie every day. Yeah, and try and listen to an album every day.
Okay, I feel like
which one was more successful?
The album.
Yes, correct.
Just give us like your top 3 that you listen to.
That's a great idea.
Hold up.
In the meantime.
Yeah, no, I've got it. Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple.
You like that one?
Yeah,
I love that one.
I thought it was good.
I love that album, mate.
Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers.
Oh,
nice. Rock and roll.
What's another pick? Untitled Black Is by Salt. I thought it was.
I haven't heard that one.
There you go. There's 3.
Bro, Fetch the Bolt Cutters.
Yeah.
Crazy album, bro. Yeah. Just immense. Like all the lyrical content is really fascinating and a weird album. Yeah, a lot of interesting percussion and there's like that song. I think I've played it in the presence of you. It's like it's like a piano song and then it ends with like her dogs barking. You know that? I don't know.
Don't know.
Yeah, that's the title track.
But
I've heard the title track. Is that what that is?
Yeah, right. Fetch the Bolt Cutters.
No, it's just interesting because for me it was a case of like I was like shit. I just don't really listen to albums, so I was trying to get back into it. And just jumping from genres as well a lot. Like, there's some of the albums there that were like, there was like a post-punk album that I listened to, and then I'd go and listen to like, some experimental stuff, some like electronic music. Because I used to be very much a huge rock purist. Like I would only listen to rock and that would be about it. And then it got to a point where like I think in like year 12 or year 13 where I was just like, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to listen to anything. Yeah.
What's interesting about Fetch the Bolt Cutters is it was one of very, 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 very few albums to get the 10 out of 10 from Pitchfork.
Oh, okay.
Which is the biggest music review website, you know, in the world. Like I think the last one before that was like a Kanye West, the Kanye West album, the Twisted Fantasy one. That one,
yeah.
You know, which was like at least 10 years ago. Yeah. And it's like, that's interesting to me because I think it'll always be tied to that as well. But also Punisher, Phoebe Bridgers.
Yeah.
Me and Ben love that album.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's cool that you listened.
Did you already listen? Had you already listened to Phoebe Bridgers? Or was that your first
experience?
And you liked it? Yeah.
Go back and listen to the rest.
Yeah. Listen to A Stranger in the Alps album. I love that.
So that's great. Yeah. No,
and she's also done like a lot of collaborations with other people.
So
there's the Better Living Oblivion Center or something. What is it?
I don't remember.
Can't remember the name of it. But if you look at her profile, there's like
she's got one with that
and Boy Genius.
Yeah, and Boy Genius. Yeah, she's got the Boy Genius one, and she's got the one with that guy from some other band, Bright Eyes or something.
Better Oblivion Community Center.
Yeah, I think that's with Connor Oberst or something. But yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. Great stuff. Love it so much. Like, I've just like making a new playlist the other day. Like it's essentially an update of like what I'm currently listening to the most, and like it's like maybe it's like about 20 to 30 songs, and like 6 or 8 of them have got Phoebe Bridgers in them.
Nice. No, what I've been liking is I just put that album on in the background while I'm like doing whatever, or sometimes even driving or whatever, and just vibing, you know.
Bro, listen to the lyrics, you'll cry. So sad. Such a sad album.
It's good shit, bro. It's like
I love the way that album ends with a massive scream. Like it's so, because like the rest of it's so subdued and you're just hearing about all these things, and it's almost like at the end she's just sick of it, she just wants to release, and she just goes like
It's not her screaming though, is it?
I'm pretty sure it is. Well, I'm pretty sure it's a lot of people.
I heard a male scream.
I think there's probably the whole band.
Oh, maybe.
Screaming. But you can hear it or something. You can hear it at the end after it's like died down. She's just going like
right. Like they're real breathy, like
like I think she's just being silly. Yeah. Cool album.
Yeah, that's me. Is that it?
I reckon.
Yeah. Sweet. All right. That's another episode of the RedLaughRiot podcast done. I've been Matt.
I've been Ben.
Follow us on our various social medias, yada, yada, yada.
Letterboxd.com/realclose.
And I'm Michael.